refuse to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
T-minus 60 seconds and counting. We are go for Apollo 7 at this time.
And from the crew of Apollo 8, we close with good night, good luck, a Merry Christmas, and God bless all of you on the good Earth.
We have ignition sequence start. Engines on. 5, 4, 3, 2.
Listen, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
We leave as we came, and God willing, as we shall return, with peace and in hope for all mankind. On our way, Houston.
From 1969 to 1972, we had, a total of 6 moon landings. 12 humans walked on the surface of the moon. We have elevated the human condition. We have improved human lives. We have raised the standard of living for every person on Earth because of space exploration. We're going to go back to the moon, and we're going to take what we learned there, and we're going to go to Mars.
I thought we'd start that very quick recap of Apollo history just to remind everybody of the great visuals of that event and also a little bit of a nod to where we're going in the future because, in fact, we're planning on returning to the moon with the ultimate goal of going on to Mars under the Project Artemis. And we're doing it this time differently from Apollo. This time we'll be doing it with international partners and commercial partners and in a sustainable way. So we'll be getting to that in a little bit. But this afternoon we're looking at Apollo. And it's been 50 years since the Apollo missions. And we all know the history, or at least we think we do. That video clip catches it very well. President Kennedy makes that announcement in 1961 that we should go to the moon. Actually, that speech is from 1962, the clip you saw. The second of his big speeches on Apollo. But he made that announcement in 1961. The United States goes to the moon in 1969 and concludes the moon program in 1972 and moves on to other things. And we understand that story pretty well. We think we know it pretty well. But 50 years have gone by and we know a lot more about the Apollo program than we used to know before. Researchers in historical matters have been delving into the archives, the formerly classified materials, and we know quite a bit more about it. And there's a new way we can look at Apollo. There's many new things we can find out about it. Today we've got 6 speakers. I was going to say 5, but of course our keynote speaker has already just arrived, so we'll turn to Dr. Aldrin in just a minute. But our 6 speakers are going to cover topics on the decision to go to the moon and why we decided not to continue going to the moon, the science results of Apollo, the culture of spaceflight and how that impacted the Apollo program, the issues of diplomacy and how the Apollo program affected international relations and foreign policy. And finally, we'll conclude with some thoughts on the meaning of the moon landing, particularly from our perspective of 50 years. But it gives me the greatest of pleasure to introduce to the audience our special guest speaker, Dr. Buzz Aldrin, a man who I think in this audience needs no introduction, but I just gave him one anyway. So, Dr. Aldrin.
Excuse the lateness of my arrival. I left Ellington via Houston. We usually, 50 years ago, left with an afterburner. But it was just a Honda jet, but I'll tell you, that was a beautiful aircraft. I feel so honored to be with such high-level academicians. I went to the military academy. I went to Air Force Academy when that first opened up. And I thought I'd go back come to cadet. Now, I ended up at the test pilot school. I worked combat units, but they needed a commandant in the test pilot school. So, I have some fairly formal remarks, and then if there's any time, I'll go into some ideas about the future. But I think there may be some time later on in one of the sessions to edge in Jim Green or somebody else. I forget who's on the schedule. Theodore Roosevelt was the first president to ride in an airplane, a submarine, and to use a telephone. He dared and did where others wondered and worried. He also built the Panama Canal, which many said could not be done. The point is, he looked forward. It was a man of action, shaping the future. That is how we must be thinking today. Almost 110 years ago, TR gave his famous Man in the Arena speech, where he said, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done a better job. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred with dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs and comes short again and again. Because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds? Who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions? Who spends himself in a worthy cause? Who at best knows, in the end, the triumph of high achievement? And who, at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory or defeat. Historically, America has always dared greatly, has been rewarded for our daring. We pioneered human space exploration and human space flight. These acts of daring did not come without sacrifice, including the loss of astronauts, time, and resources, but they did deliver the future. America was not only the first, and today remains the only nation to land men on the moon. Those investments in daring returned everything from satellite communications to artificial limbs, from fire department equipment, solar cells to insulin pumps, Velcro to scratch-resistant contact lenses, plastics to iPhones and shock-absorbent running shoes. The polymers in our spacesuits now save lives in fire-resistant suits for firefighters. while space-based water filtration technologies now save lives in remote places around the Earth. And think of the other rewards from daring to go into space. Wireless headsets, smoke detectors, freeze-dried foods, tiny, hardy cameras, air purifiers, memory foam, ear thermometers, airplane de-icing, endless computer innovations, and the list goes on. All because we dared. So where are we today? On the cusp of another era of daring, I hope. We should encourage 4 big steps forward, and here they are. I just rearranged them. First, we need to think internationally, creating synergies in space at the international level. Why not a coalition? I happen to like the word alliance. For example, the top international space agendas, entities, that's a more inclusive a term, including America, Europe, Russia, China, Japan, perhaps others, with the private sectors, in an effort to get the best of all parties and get us back to the moon for good, and then on to Mars and beyond. Synergies that take leadership and effort to create, and that also boils down to daring. We should start thinking about more public-private partnerships in the United States, getting daring in the public sector to match daring in the private sector, the way daring in the private sector picked up the baton and ran with what we started in Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo, and Shuttle. We get more done when we work together. Right now, we could use more innovation. A clearer memory of how we efficiently got to the moon. More reliance on synergies created by public-private effort. We need to refocus ourselves on what works and on hard and fast goals. Efficient ways to space, the moon, and Mars, not allowing waste, profiteering, or ego to get in the way of achievement. That was how Apollo worked. With the Soviets nipping at our heels, we got there first. We did not do that to make money, but to achieve a national goal. In my view, the military-industrial space complex often acts on the notion that more spending is better. More profit is the goal. And more time is just fine. Those assumptions are all three wrong. Efficiency is better than just throwing more money and infrastructure at space. Profit is fine and a valuable motivator, but it is not the motivation that got us to the moon. That was a combination of national security, national pride, and higher purpose. Finally, time does matter. At almost 90, within a couple of months, I can tell you time is a precious resource. And it is for our nation. We have spent a lot of time over the last 40 years on wishful thinking. I think if you had every moonwalker and Apollo astronaut here today, they would all say, enough wishful thinking. Let's get back into action. High national purpose, the moon and Mars. And the last of these four, and last, we need to think more about space as the future, and that means turning our attention to the next steps in human spaceflight. There are still unanswered questions from life support, radiation, re-entry speeds, returning from Mars, how we establish a simple, cost-efficient, reusable, and interestingly routine infrastructure for human presence on the moon, on Mars, and in space. An efficient cycling spacecraft along what you might call a transway. I'll introduce the term trans-orbit craft. And from established inhabited destinations in space. My concern about preserving and enhancing institutional knowledge has caused me to set up a human spaceflight institute in Texas. And increasingly, with nodes of participants, I hope around the nation and world with academics, engineers, and astronauts, all doing what they can, and thinkers and doers who can help define how we got where we are. Do we like where we are? And where do we want to go in the future? That is my wish and legacy. Where does that leave us? Where Theodore Roosevelt would be looking today for the future. He might, if alive today, be thinking about being the first president to fly in space, or perhaps just the first to watch humans set foot and stay on the moon. Set foot and set up camp on Mars. In all the events, he would expect a great deal of a great nation and a great world of great nations. Which is why we should start to expect more of ourselves and make it happen. If I got a couple of minutes.
How about we,
I'm going to my Omega and my new Apple Watch. I'd like to introduce the term Space Exploration Alliance. And that includes the capable entities for think we need the international agencies first, and then the commercials. Otherwise, it's liable to get out of hand if you think about it. And I think NASA can put this together at a Space Explorations Operations Center, like Mission Control in Houston, Texas, where there will emanate a Space Exploration Operations Plan led by NASA with very close integration with ESA, Russia, JAXA, CNSA. Then we bring in SpaceX, Blue Origin, and United Launch Alliance. If you work them in first, they're going to find some individual ways of getting it. But the international community has so much to offer the commercial activities, regardless of where they are, in cooperation, in markets. I'm not a big fan of the gateway. I do not believe we need a permanent structure in an orbit around the moon. I do not believe we need a permanent structure or station in a permanent orbit around the Earth, except for research. Right now done on the ISS, and I hope its replacement will be about 3 laboratories, smaller laboratories in a lower inclination orbit. What we need is a transportation system from low Earth orbit to lunar orbit and back. I call it a trans-orbit craft. Coincidentally, it uses the first couple of elements of the gateway, the PPE and the halo and utilization. They accompany an Orion. Now, you and I know that there's no way that that's going to get to the moon on an SLS. I am ashamed to think that 50 years ago, the Saturn V took the command module, the lunar module, and 3 of us to the moon. Entered orbit, separated, landed, explored, lifted off, rendezvous, and came back. Today, the pride of America, SLS, the launch vehicle, the pride of our spacecraft, Orion, cannot get into lunar orbit without any particular maneuver capability. And that is why we have this silly near rectilinear halo orbit. 7-day orbit, 1,000 miles above the moon, going pretty fast, takes 3 spacecraft to land on the moon. That's a compromise from going low Earth orbit on a trans-orbit craft to lunar orbit, taking Orion there. Orion comes back, the trans-orbit craft comes back with solar electric propulsion. Takes a month or so to get back, and when it comes back, it goes into the orbit for the next mission to the moon. We need 2 Falcon Heavies to get the GLI stages. Take that up. Probably the transfer orbit craft first, get it in an orbit, then Orion. Now, we may need the same sort of thing to get the lander up there first and have it run through some of its exercises. I'd sure like to debate this with anyone. We don't need depots out there. We need to depart for the moon, for Mars, from low Earth orbit. Refuel in low Earth orbit from the surface of the Earth, a 1 or 2 stage from the moon, and with nuclear reactor in GEO, with water up and fuel down to low Earth orbit. When it leaves from low Earth orbit, no depot. It's a different orbit every time to Mars.
Yeah, the watch says it's
Okay.
3 o'clock. Thank you very
I
much.
will answer questions and expound further when possible. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you, Dr. Aldrin, for giving us a great start this afternoon and those inspirational and innovative thoughts.